Okay, the MPs are never shy of opinions, and they're not always delivered in perfect harmony. Let's bring in our esteemed Tuesday trio to get their view from the Hill. Whitby MP Selina Caesar-Chavin is Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Calgary MP Michelle Rempel is the immigration critic for the Conservatives. Vancouver MP Jenny Kwan is the immigration critic for the NDP. Welcome to you all. Quick thought from you, starting with you, Michelle. Immigration switched from economic to more family and humanitarian. Right idea or wrong idea?
Well, you know, I think everyone agrees that Canada has a role to play in terms of humanitarian immigration, refugee resettlement. We also have to balance that in the terms of our economy. So when I look at, you know, I was Minister of State for Western Economic Diversification. One of the things that I heard over and over again in terms of long-term growth was the availability of skilled labor. We've got an aging workforce, so economic immigration, it's important for the long term. And I think today's decision I think the number was over 24,000 spots that were reduced, 21% of economic immigration, which the Liberals did not campaign on as part of their Syrian refugee initiative. That's really short-sighted. I don't think that they consulted with the Canadian Chambers of Commerce, provinces and territories. You know, the person that was just on said that it was shocking, I think. I think it's really short-sighted. The caregiver program, 8,000 people cut from that. That's crazy. Right. And they haven't talked about how they're going to provide services to the 250% increase in refugees in this upcoming year. We've got people still living in houses or in hotels, not getting language training services. It was a shocking levels report, and I think it wasn't really well thought out.
All right, I'll get to you, Selina, in a minute. I just want to get Michelle in here, or Jenny in here before we go to you. What concerned you about the numbers today?
Well, I think several-fold. First off, the refugee numbers. You know, Canadians have spoken to say that we want to receive Syrian refugees, and I think we all accept that and we embrace it. So those numbers are in, and that's great. But what the government has done with this plan, though, is to jeopardize other groups as well. So we've just talked about the economic group, that those numbers are reducing. In fact, on humanitarian category, that's actually a separate category than that of the refugees. Those numbers are going down, and they were already going down. On the refugee numbers, we don't actually know from this report if the other countries, those numbers are being reduced. And last but not least, I am dismayed about this. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, during the campaign said explicitly, particularly to the immigrant community, that he would increase the parents and grandparents reunification numbers. Now, they've increased the application numbers, but the actual number of people have not increased. They're the same as what the Conservatives have put forward. So effectively, we're not bringing more people in. And what that means is that families are going to continue to wait to be reunited with parents and grandparents. I know of people whose parents have actually died waiting for more than 10 years with the application process. This plan doesn't help it.
Wow. That's quite a shopping list of concerns there. But deal with the economic immigration question. Why cut the people who are probably the fastest and most productive immigrants that we could bring into this country?
I think we really need to look at the whole picture. When families are not reunited, when they don't have their loved ones here in Canada with them, it really puts a stress and a burden on those families. So increasing the number of immigrants that we have to this country and reducing that backlog that has been left over the last 10 years, and focusing in on family reunification is an essential goal of this government, and Minister McCallum has done an awesome job in articulating that, because once you have that reunification, that's when families are able to thrive. And it's not about sort of putting them in silos, but looking at it more of a holistic way. You know, years ago I came to this country as an immigrant, as my parents did, and understanding that when you come as a package, as a family unit, that you're able to then make decisions as families that could increase the economic and social viability of this country.
You were shaking your head?
Yeah, I mean, to say that this somehow helps families is flat out wrong. With regard to the refugee stream, a 250% increase without explaining how they're going to increase processing times in other areas is a concern. Helping families by cutting 8,000 from 30,000 caregiver spots. These are people who care for people who have severe disabilities, some of the most vulnerable in Canada, doesn't help families. And then when you think about the economic immigration immigration stream. This isn't just about skilled trades, Don. You know, there's a really high percentage of Canada's medical professionals, pharmacists, doctors, dentists, that come through this immigration stream. How are they going to come through now? It's just so short-sighted, and you can see it's being widely panned today, and I know why they sat on it as long as they did, because it just contained this ridiculous amount of bad news.
You want to add in anything there?
Well, I do. I think that the plan highlights, I think, the challenges and the issues, and I don't think the government had put very much thought into it. The refugees file, as I said, Canadians voted for this, and we accept it. And so related to that is that what is the government doing to ensure that the resettlement process is in place? So that's a separate issue. But on the issue around reunification, the government talks a good talk, but in reality, they're not delivering with this plan. Because on the parents and grandparents, they said that they would increase the number of applications from 5,000 to 10,000. But the number of people remain at 20,000. How could you increase 5,000 applications with the same number of people? It doesn't add up, and that's the reality.
Is her math wrong, or is the government's math
You know,
wonky?
at the end of the day, the issue here is making sure that we commit to our Canadian families, we commit to our Canadians, and have them have their families present. The previous government had left a backlog, and those numbers where families wanted to be reunited it just exploded. And so allowing them to come together is what
the backlog from the Liberals.
There was a backlog,
that's incorrect.
Are you putting a lot of
huge
resources into it? Is there going to be a lot more processing staff put in place? Is that part of this plan? I didn't hear that announced.
We will put systems in place to ensure that the reunification process works for Canadians and works for everyone involved. I mean, I understand that my colleagues here believe that it was short-sighted. I could assure you that this was the minister's #1 priority. A lot of thought went into this. A lot of consultation went into this. And although it wasn't necessarily one of the campaign commitments that we came out with, when we got into government, we realized that there was this backlog, and we realized that Canadian families needed to be together.
Well, Michelle's point was interesting, though, because a lot of these immigrants, the economic immigrants, would actually fill jobs maybe the Canadians don't want. Was anyone consulted in the business community about what the impact would be of cutting the number?
I honestly cannot speak to the consultation with regards to chambers or those kinds of groups across the country.
There's some very highly skilled ones too, by the way. This is not just.
But the end of the day, when we looked at the numbers, there was a huge disparity between the numbers of families that were backlogged in the system and were not being able to be with their families, and that places an enormous strain on families, on social systems, and on economic systems.
Interesting.
You know, okay, first of all, my colleague is wrong. The backlog that we inherited from the Liberals when they were last in government, we worked the whole mandate to reduce that. We can always do more, I agree. But that's wrong. That was a backlog we inherited. Second of all, whenever we undertook the immigration levels report, there was cross-country consultation with chambers of commerce, groups that provide resettlement services, groups that provide caregivers. That didn't happen this time. And I think it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of days. The reason why my colleague can't answer that question, I feel bad that she wasn't briefed, was that it didn't happen. And we're going to get a lot of pushback on this.